Our last speaker, you've made it through, congratulations. Our last, but certainly not least speaker, our very own Kosuke Uetake, who is a professor of marketing here at the Yale School of Management, one of our newer team members. He also has a PhD in economics, so we'll hear a little bit more from the analytical side of the discipline. He's interested in financial markets and financial products, in customer recommendations, social interactions and social networks, and for this talk you'll hear a nice combination of his interest in financial markets and peer-to-peer behavior. So if you're ready, Kosuke, it's all yours. If I have time for a few jokes. Start them about a horse. So this horse walks into a bar. And the bartender says, "Why the long face?" Nothing gets him moving like my jokes.
Former classmates, Kay and Ken, from Northwestern, where I got a PhD. So we are studying online peer-to-peer lending markets, and I think this is the last talk, and this is before the lunch. I think I want to start from the one-sentence version of my research, and I think the general insight that I get from my research is kind of similar to what Donald was talking about. So I'm going to show you, using the data from peer-to-peer lending market, the slight change in the design of the online platform is going to impact the market outcomes significantly. Okay, so we need to carefully understand the incentives of the market participants, and we need to carefully design the online platform because that is going to affect the market outcomes significantly. So we're going to show you using the data. We're going to convince you in 20 minutes. Okay. All right. So as you know, there are more and more online peer-to-peer market, P2P markets in many fields, right? I think most of you guys have ever used Uber, Lyft, Airbnb, Upwork, etc., right? So in this paper, we are looking at online consumer loans, peer-to-peer lending market. Right? So borrowers and lenders are individuals like us, right? But the general insight I got from this online peer-to-peer lending market can be applied to other online P2P markets. Okay? So because we're looking at the Prosper.com, one of the peer-to-peer lending markets where unsecured loans are transacted. So let me show you some market data about these P2P lending markets. Right? So you can see this P2P lending market is rapidly growing. Right? In 2014, here, the market size of P2P lending market was greater than $2.5 billion. Right? This is no longer the tiny small markets that we can ignore. Right? But in those P2P markets, especially in P2P lending markets, P2P consumer loans market, they're facing a fundamental issue, fundamental problem, which is so-called adverse selection problem, or in other words, lack of trust. In those online P2P markets, especially loan markets, buyers and sellers do not meet in person. Right? So the quality of the seller is not verified ex ante. Probably you have this kind of experience. You're going to buy something from eBay, but you don't know the sellers. You cannot trust the sellers. Probably you're going to hesitate doing that. Right? Thinking about lending money to someone you have never met. Right? Probably you don't want to do that. Right? So in this kind of market, lack of trust, in other words, adverse selection problem, is a serious concern. Okay? And the famous economist, George Akerlof in UC Berkeley, showed in his paper, theoretically, that this kind of market, without trust between buyers and sellers, can be collapsed. In other words, in this kind of market, in the worst case, there is no transaction happen, and the market is going to die. Okay? This is the worst case scenario that I want to avoid. Right? So the big picture question we are asking in this project is how can we make the platform work better? Okay? By mitigating this lack of trust or adverse selection problem. We can design the platform so that we can mitigate this information problem between the market, between the borrowers and lenders, or between the sellers and buyers. Okay? Of course, there are several ways that we can solve this adverse selection problem or lack of trust problem. But probably most of you are familiar with this reputation mechanism, right? Like eBay, Airbnb, Uber, et cetera, those online P2P markets are using reputation mechanism. Right? After each transaction, the buyer and the seller evaluate each other, right? And then eventually the buyers and sellers establish their reputation, and then trust is going to be built. Right? That's a good case. But there are some cases that this kind of reputation mechanism may not probably work well. For example, if the transaction is so infrequent, like in this loan market, right? Once the borrower comes to the market, gets funded, but probably this borrower will not come back to this market for 1 year or 2 years, right? Because he has money already. Right? So then how can we establish reputation? How can we establish trust? Right? So probably in those kind of markets, we need another remedy to solve this adverse selection or lack of trust problem. Okay? And that's our focus in this project. And in this paper, using the data from this Prosper.com or P2P lending market, this signaling mechanism is a very powerful source to mitigate and solve this adverse selection problem. Okay? So again, I'm going to show you the data from Prosper.com. And the unique feature of this Prosper.com is that in this market, borrowers, the sellers of the loans, are going to announce the public reserve interest rate. This public reserve interest rate is the maximum interest rate that this borrower is happy to accept. Okay, so in this market, hey, I want to accept the loans with like 40% of the interest rate, or I'm happy to accept 20% of the interest rate. Okay? And lenders can observe this behavior, borrower's behavior. Okay? And using the data, I'm arguing that this maximum interest rate this borrower is announcing in this market, it's telling something about borrower's credit worthiness. Okay? In other words, this reserve interest rate, the maximum interest rate the borrower is going to accept, is working as a signaling device. Okay? That's our argument. Okay? And this is very powerful to solve this lack of trust information problem in this Prosper market. Okay? So this is how my paper goes. So first of all, I'm going to show you some evidence that this reserve interest rate, a public reserve interest rate, is working as a signaling device. Okay? I'm going to show you some evidence using the data. I'm going to skip most of the second part. Okay? But in the second part, I'm doing some so-called structural analysis. Okay? I won't talk about the details of the structural analysis. But in the last part of my paper, we're going to show some simulation results in which we're going to shut down this reserve interest rate. In other words, we're going to shut down this signaling device. What's going to happen in this kind of market without any signaling device? Okay? And I'm going to show you the worst case in which the market, this P2P market, can be collapsed. Okay? All right, so this is an example from Prosper.com. Okay? So this borrower, this family, is requesting $7,000 at the reserve interest rate of 13%. Okay, so this is the reserve interest rate. This is the maximum interest rate this family is willing to accept. Okay? And I'm arguing that this interest rate is going to be the signal. Okay? Of course, this family describes the reason for money. This guy is willing to open a new business. I cannot really see, but they describe why do they need money, how do you guys use money, these kind of things. Right? And also, you can see some credit information of borrowers. Okay? Like this borrower, this family has credit grade C, home ownership, 39% of the debt-to-income ratio. Okay? As a lender, if you're interested in more detailed information of credit, you can click this link or this link to get more detailed information of borrower's credit information. Okay? So there are a lot of credit information, but still not perfect. Okay? And this is how Prosper works. Okay? Again, first, borrowers come to the market and create listings, like in the previous slide, right? In which the borrower describes how much they want to have and to what reserve interest rate. Okay? And also, at the same time, Prosper, the platform, is going to get the credit information from Experian and post those credit information in the listing. Okay? After that, lenders come to the market, look at the listings, and they decide bid. Okay? We found that 95% of the lenders bid just $50. Okay? Even though borrowers request like $10,000, each lender bids just $50 or something like that. So for one borrower, there are multiple lenders, each of which provide like $50 or $100, very tiny amount. Okay? The funding decision in this loan market is done by auctions. Okay? I will not talk about the details of the auction mechanism, okay? But the interest rate of the loan, okay, the price of the loan is determined by auctions, okay? Determined by the lender's bidding behavior. Okay? And the key feature here in this auction mechanism is there is no partial funding, okay, for the borrowers. As a borrower, I request $5,000, okay, and I just attracted $1,000. Okay? In that case, I get nothing. There is only yes and no. Get funded or nothing. Okay? And once the loan is originated, the borrower is going to repay over 3 years. Okay? The length of the loan is fixed. Okay? And if you default with this possible loan, this default is going to report it to the credit bureau, and the loan is sold to the third-party debt collectors. So your credit history is going to be severely harmed, okay? Even though this is the online peer-to-peer market. Okay? So this is how Prosper works. I'm going to skip this one. So I'm going to show you some data. Oh, question? Yes.
One quick question.
This one?
Can a lender bid for a partial amount? So he can, right?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And if so, is there an ordering of the lender in terms of the borrower's payment, the first come first, like a preferred one?
Yeah.
Versus?
So every time a new lender comes into the auction, this platform is going to sort the bids from the best to the worst, and then cut at the point of threshold.
Yeah, but in terms of fulfillment of the loan afterwards, the repayment by the borrower, does he first pay the lender who bid first?
No, it's equal. Oh. It's equal. Yeah, it's equal. Yeah. Okay. So I just want to show you some data about the loan performance from this prosper.com. Okay. So here I'm plotting the default rate across credit grades. Credit grade AA, this is the best group. Credit grade HR, high risk, this is the worst group. Okay. So on average, so this is the average. On average, the default rate is about less than 30%. Okay. Even in the best group, AA group, the default rate is about 15%. In high risk, higher, greater than 40%. So this is pretty risky investment. Okay.
On this website?
And because of this high risk, I also calculated mean return. Okay. Here, this is mean return by, again, credit grade. Surprisingly, all credit grades have negative return. Right? So just to show some positive side, I'm also calculating median IRR, median return, now all positive. So the distribution is so skewed. Some really bad borrowers are not repaying, but average borrowers are actually paying on time. And also just to make sure, our data set is coming from right after the financial crisis in 2008. Okay. So I looked at other data points, like 2011, 2012, and actually we found the default rate is much lower and the mean return is actually positive, right? So now this is a great investment opportunity, but during this time period, maybe not. Okay? Right, so this is just a loan performance of...
Is this on median IRR? Is that in percentage? So it'll be 15%, 20%?
Exactly. Okay. So now I'm going to get into our empirical analysis. Okay. So again, I want to argue that this public reserve interest rate, the maximum interest rate this borrower is willing to accept, is working as a signaling of borrower's creditworthiness that lenders cannot observe. Okay? So let me give you why this is happening. So intuitively, this is pretty simple. Intuitively, I'm a borrower, and I request 40% of the reserve interest rate. In other words, I'm saying that I'm going to accept 40% of the interest rate. Then probably, oh, this year professor is crazy, right? Then lenders think that this guy is not creditworthy, which means that you guys give me higher contract interest rate. Probably I will get like 36% of the interest rate because I'm not creditworthy, right? But this is not the end of the story, right? because then all borrowers are going to say, I'm going to accept 10% of the reserve interest rate. Right? In other words, all borrowers, all bad borrowers, can pretend to be good borrowers by saying lower reserve interest rate. Right? So in order to make this public reserve interest rate as a credible signaling device, we need some trade-off. Right? We need some countervailing force which make this public reserve interest rate as a credible signaling device of borrowers' creditworthiness. Right? And in this market, this countervailing force is coming from the funding probability, okay? The probability that I'm going to get money. Okay? So the trade-off is something like this. If I post high reserve interest rate, okay, my contract interest rate is likely to be higher. Okay? But at the same time, this is bad, right? High contract interest rate, this is bad. But at the same time, my funding probability of getting money is also higher, which is good. Right? Now this is the trade-off. If I post low reserve interest rate, my contract interest rate is likely to be lower, which is good. Lower contract interest rate is good, but at the same time, my funding probability is lower, which is bad. Okay? So the funding probability, the probability of getting money from this online website, and the contract interest rate that I have to pay, right, is creating the trade-off. Okay? And the important thing is different borrowers, good borrowers and bad borrowers, they are evaluating this trade-off in a different way. Okay? So think about, I'm a really good borrower. Then I have outside option. I can go to Citibank or I can go to Bank of America to get money from those commercial banks. So for me, I don't really care about the funding probability because anyway, I can get money from outside option. Right? So for me, what I do care is the contract interest rate. If I can get the loan with lower interest rate than Bank of America or Citibank, I'm going to take the money from this online website. Right? But if I'm a bad borrower, I don't have outside options. I cannot go to Citibank to get money. So for me, funding probability is more important than contract interest rate, probably because this is the only available source, financial source for me. Right? So different borrowers, good borrowers and bad borrowers, evaluate this trade-off between funding probability and contract interest rate in a different way. Right? And then good borrowers are going to choose lower reserve interest rate and get lower contract interest rate and lower funding probability. But I don't care. Good borrowers don't care because I have a outside option. But bad borrowers, they put higher reserve interest rate and get higher contract interest rate with higher chance of getting money. Because this is my priority, bad borrower's priority. Okay? I'm going to show that this theory is actually supported by the data, okay? Through the series of empirical analysis. Okay? So the first empirical analysis I'm going to show you, or hypothesis one, is higher reserve interest rate is going to higher funding probability. If we post higher reserve interest rate, the probability of getting money is going to be higher. Okay? I will not talk about the details of the econometrics, but here, this is the implication. This is our empirical finding. Okay? Our empirical finding is that if you post 1% higher reserve interest rate, okay, the probability of getting money from this online prosper.com is going to be increased by 0.55%. Okay? So if you post higher reserve interest rate, you're more likely to get money. Okay? This is first hypothesis, and this is correct. Okay? The second hypothesis, if you post higher reserve interest rate, your contract interest rate, the price of the loan, is also getting higher. Okay? Again, I run this kind of empirical analysis, and I found that actually this is the case. If you post 1% higher reserve interest rate, your contract interest rate is going to be 0.68% higher. Okay? So this is, again, correct. So combining these two pieces together, what we can say is there is trade-off in this data set. Okay? Our story is correct. Okay? If we post higher reserve interest rate, you get higher contract interest rate, which is bad, but at the same time, your funding probability is getting higher. Okay? So this is creating the trade-off, and the trade-off exists in this data set, okay, in this online platform. Okay? So the last thing I want to show you is that actually those who post higher reserve interest rate is bad guys, bad borrowers. Okay? In this Prosper.com, we do observe borrowers' repayment behavior every month. Okay? So we can connect the borrower's repayment behavior with their reserve rate choice, a public signal choice, okay? Through this regression. And we actually found that if you post higher, 1% higher reserve interest rate, this guy is 1.25% likely to default. Okay? So actually, those who post higher reserve interest rate are bad borrowers. Okay? So if you combine all hypotheses 1, 2, 3, now we can plausibly say that this reserve interest rate is working as a signaling device. Okay? So far, so good? Okay? So I'm saying that this reserve interest rate is working as a signaling device, and this reserve interest rate is telling some credit worthiness that lenders cannot observe. Okay? So this is a very powerful tool to transmit the unobserved quality of the sellers to the buyers. Okay? So this is the first part of our paper. Okay? And in the second part of the paper, let me skip this. We're going to do so-called structural model analysis. Okay? Again, I will not talk about the details of the structural model analysis because it's a bit more complicated. Okay? But let me tell you the benefit of doing this kind of complicated machine business. Right? The benefit or beauty of this structural analysis is now we can simulate what's going to happen if we change the design of the platform. Okay? So for example, we can predict the consumer's borrower's behavior, the lender's behavior, if we change the design of the platform. So we can think about, like we're going to discuss, if we shut down the public reserve interest rate, if we shut down the signaling device in this market, how borrowers and the lenders are going to change their behavior and how the market outcomes are going to change. Okay? We can simulate that. Or we can think about what if these online peer-to-peer lending markets are not using auction mechanism. So far in this platform is using auction mechanism, but what if the platform switched from auction mechanism to other like listing, posted listing the mechanism, or the other pricing mechanism. Right? We can predict borrower's behavior, lender's behavior under different platform designs. Okay? So this is a very powerful tool in thinking about the design of the platforms, especially in this kind of online platforms. So here, I'm going to show you one case study in which, like I said, I'm going to shut down the public reserve interest rate. I'm going to shut down the signaling. I'm going to shut down the way the borrowers transmit unobserved quality to the buyers. Okay? So what's going to happen? By the way, this is the structural model, pretty complicated thing. Okay? So please believe me, I solve and I estimate this kind of series of equations and I get the results. Okay? I'm going to skip it. So this is, again, the simulation results. Because I'm going to shut down the public reserve interest rate signaling device. And here, I'm plotting the credit supply curve. Okay? So the x-axis is amount, and the y-axis is interest rate, basically the price of the loan. Okay? If you remember Econ 101, the price, quantity and the price, and the supply curve is always upward sloping. Right? The higher the price, the greater the amount is. This is a Econ 101 supply curve. Right? But this is not the case in this market. Okay? This is because now I shut down the public reserve interest rate signaling. Okay? The borrowers do not have any way to transmit their unobserved quality to buyers or lenders. Or from the lender's perspective, lenders cannot distinguish good borrowers from bad borrowers. Right? So what's going to happen? Lenders do not want to give money to borrowers anymore. Right? Because I cannot trust those borrowers without any signaling. Okay? This is what's happening in this market.
What about the credit scores? Did it can't use that?
Yes, of course. So this analysis is conditional on the same credit score. Okay? But a credit score is not perfect information. Right? Like, I'm from Japan, I don't have any credit history, and my credit score is so bad, even though I have a job here. Right? Well, this is a case. So the credit score is not perfect measure, right? So this store is conditional on the same credit score. Okay? And so this is what's happening. The credit supply curve, the supply curve of the loan is now backward bending. Okay? It's not something like what we learned in Econ 101, upward sloping supply curve. And this backward bending supply curve is a serious problem. Okay? This is a serious problem because it is now the case that the demand curve and the supply curve may not cross. Okay? This is a supply curve, and if the demand curve is something like here, the demand and the supply may not cross. Okay? In Econ 101, demand and supply is something like this. Right? And then this crossing point is where the transaction occurs. Right? But if the supply curve and demand curve does not cross like this, which implies that there is no transaction in this market. Okay? No one wants to transact in this market. Okay? So this backward bending supply curve is a serious problem. If this is happening in this market, again, this is the worst case. Okay? This is the worst case. I'm not saying this is happening every day in this market. Right? But in the worst case, it is possible that this P2P market can collapse, okay, because of this backward bending supply curve. Okay? If there is no signaling. Okay? If there is signaling, the supply curve, again, is going to be upward sloping, and the demand curve and the supply curve are going to cross. That's fine. But if you take the credit supply signaling mechanism away from the market, now it's possible that the market is going to collapse because of this lack of trust problem. Yes, Eva?
Is there impact of removing the signaling game more or less strong on the A rating and the super high risk rating?
So I'm here showing B and C, but if A, actually the supply curve is upward sloping, even after taking, exactly.
To the, yeah.
Exactly. Right, yeah. The credit grade is useful information. Right.
But Kosuke, what happens when you have a two-stage model where I can come in at I'm still having trouble with the credible signaling. Can I come in with a lower rate if I don't get a loan, then I raise the rate next in the second period, and does that change?
So in principle, they can do that, right? Once I get unsuccessful with getting money, they can come back to this market and change the interest rate of anything else. But actually, we found that those repeat borrowers do not change their specification. They don't change the reserve interest rate. They don't change the requested amount. Probably those borrowers are not that smart enough, but that's our finding. Okay. So let me conclude. So through the series of empirical analysis, I hope that I show that there exists asymmetric information problem or a lack of trust problem in this online P2P credit markets. Okay? But this signaling mechanism, in this case, the public reserve interest rate, okay, is working as a powerful device to mitigate and solve this adverse selection or lack of trust problem. Okay? And this is what I want to show. This is public reserve interest rate or without public reserve interest rate. This is small change in this platform design. Okay? But this tiny change of the platform design can completely change the market outcomes. In the worst case, this market can die. Okay? There is no transaction in this market. Right? So the last thing I want to say is this kind of data-driven platform design is a very powerful way to think about the designing of the online platforms. Okay? We need to understand the incentives of market participants, and we need to carefully design the online platforms. Okay? And yeah, this is all I have for today, and thanks for your listening. Yes?
So one of the initial premises, push the button. One of the initial premises is that the data is so sparse that people aren't participating in these markets very much, so you need the signals. But you have the data, but I'd imagine that the participation in this market is no different than it is with an Uber or Airbnb, where there's a big moat at one and very few people doing more than that. So is it really any different?
Well, in this market, loans market, asymmetric information problem is probably more important, it's more salient than other Airbnb or Uber markets, right? They're easier to get reputation. They're because of this frequent transactions. Yeah.
It matters more.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. There exists. Yeah. Yes.
I'm just trying to get my head around a little bit. Does the analysis change or your conclusion change at all based on, from the borrower's perspective, he or she is not actually lending $3,500 or $5,000, they're lending a small amount? Does the analysis change at all in terms of what that supply curve looks like?
Yeah, that's a good question, actually. In this market, most of the lenders give just $50 or $100. Probably, they're just investing for fun, probably. If they have to bear more risk by giving more amount, probably the analysis may change. Yeah, but they take, then they take this signaling more seriously, probably. Right? So I cannot really guess, but I hope there still exists. Yes.
Do you have other information? Like, for example, here the salient numbers. One is the money amount. The other one is the interest rate willing to accept. So, do you have like other popularity of the loan, or so how many people follow like those?
Exactly,
right?
exactly. So amount is of course telling some information. If I request $1 million in this platform, then probably no one is going to believe me, right? So the amount is also telling some information. Another thing we are now testing is quality of the picture and the quality of the description. Okay? And actually, the quality of the picture is telling some information. They take this loan seriously, and therefore they put more effort to get more beautiful picture or better description of the loan, things like that. And that is also telling some information. Yeah, that's possible. Yes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
So you've made it to the end. I want to thank our speakers again today. It really was an extraordinary lineup, and I think we had a great set of stimulating academic talks. So I want to thank all of you one last time. For those of you repeat customers here, you've seen this conference over the years, and it's getting better and better, and the talks are more and more engaging, and frankly, the audience is asking good questions, and we're really having a good interface between how do we take the academic work and make it useful and relevant to the practitioners. So I think this is really serving the purpose that we're hoping it serves. So I want to thank you all for coming and for staying to the end. Lunch is outside.